Welcome to Learnlyte, guys. This is the second video in object-oriented programming in Python. So let's continue. In the last video, classes and objects, we looked at how to create classes and how to create objects. In this video, we're going to take things a bit further and learn how to add various properties to our objects and have our objects perform certain actions using the class definition as the blueprint. So let's get into some code. We'll be creating a dog class and a dog object with some properties such as name, breed, and age, and the dog object will also perform such actions such as bark and bite. So let's get started and jump right into it. So I'm gonna pull up my shell right here, and I have my script also. So in the last video we already learned how to create class, so this shouldn't be new. So we're gonna begin our dog class by saying class dog, followed by parentheses and then the colon. And I have our doc string that says this class represents a dog. Alright, and we know down here in the class is where we specify any properties we want our objects to have and any actions we want them to perform. So to give our object special properties, we're going to define the attributes right here in this dog class. So we're going to define the attributes. So what were the attributes that we want our dog to have? Well, the first one is name. I'm going to set the value of name to be biscuit for now. Second property we want our object to have is a breed. I'm going to set that to husky for now. And the third one is age. I'm going to set that to 8 for now. So now we have basically outlined some attributes in our class, and these attributes right here will serve as the properties for any objects created from the dog class. So let's save and let's go ahead and hit run and see how we can access these various properties such as name, breed, and age. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the object and assign it to a variable of dog1. So dog1 equal dog. We have our brackets. Go ahead and hit enter. And now if I want the name property of the object, I simply say dog1.name. Go ahead and hit enter. I get busket. Should be biscuit, but that's simple misspelling. Alright. Now I'll just do this again. Okay, so if I want the name, dog1.name, and I get biscuit. If I want the breed, I can say dog1.breed. Go ahead and I get husky. And finally, if I want the age, I simply say dog1.age. And there I have 8. So you can see, using the class, I have basically defined some attributes here which serve as the properties for my object created from the dog class. Alright, so now I'm basically gonna have specify some methods inside of here so I can have my object perform actions. So if you want your object to perform certain actions, the way to do that is the use of methods in our class. So right here, the first action that I'm going to have my dog object do is basically bark. So for me to accomplish this now, I need to write a method called bark, and then from there on we specify what does it mean to bark. So again, to have our object basically perform some actions, we're going to have to accomplish this through the use of methods in our class. And the first action we want our object to do is bark. So we want our dog object to bark. Alright, and just for a proof of concept, we all know that this is a dog object. So if I were to call dog1 and hit enter, we get this dog object at this memory location. So we know this already from the previous video. Let's go ahead and have our dog object perform an action. So we know that to have our object perform action, we use a method. So as with any method, we begin with the def keyword, followed by the name of the method, which is bark, followed by parentheses and the colon. So something that you should note is that every method definition within a class the first argument that must be passed to it is the argument self. So whenever you're writing a method and you're defining the method within a class, you need to pass the self argument to that method. Always. You always need to pass the self argument to that method, and the self argument must be the first argument the method accepts. So you're probably wondering, what does this self mean? Well, this self basically just represents the object. It just represents the object that's being created. So we're saying this object can bark, and we need to pass the self object. We need to pass the self argument to any functions defined within a class, and that self basically just represents the object, right? So with that being said, what does it mean to bark? So we're just gonna print out this word or this phrase, roof, 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 roof. So that's what it means to basically bark, at least for our dog object. So I'm gonna save, and I'm gonna hit run. So I'm gonna create my dog object again. So dog1 equals to dog. Go ahead and hit enter, and if I want my dog object to bark, I simply say dog1 dot bark followed by my parentheses. Now I don't need to pass a value for self, because as I said before, self just represents the object being created. And as I said before, once you're defining any methods or any functions within a class, the first argument that must be passed to the function is self. Even if no other arguments are passed to the function, you must always pass the self argument. If you don't, then the function may not work properly. So right here, we don't need to supply a value for self because self represents the object. So all we do is just go ahead and hit enter, and we get roof, roof. And right here, through the use of a method in our class definition, we have our object perform an action, which is bark. And what it means to bark is just to simply print out to the user roof, roof. Okay. The next action that I want my object to be able to do is to bite. So again, I'm going to use methods to accomplish this, or functions. So I'm going to say def bite. Remember, we always pass the self argument, even if no other argument is passed. And then right down here, we're going to say what does it mean to bite. And to bite is just simply to say print this, and I'm going to say I bite you. Alright. And we go ahead and save, hit run. So if we say dog1 equal dog, we go ahead and hit enter. So now we say dog1 dot bite, and now we have our dog bite you. And we also have access to the other methods such as bark, and we also have access to the properties such as name, which is set to biscuit. Alright, so we've learned how to basically add some properties to our objects and have our objects basically perform action through the use of methods or function definitions within the class. So these are all known as the class methods, and class methods are simply just functions we define within the class. Alright, so with that being said, now I'm going to talk about a special function known as the init function. So before I get into that, I want to basically point out a few things. So in this case, you can see right here, we are basically hard coding the values for name, breed, and age. What that means is that every object created from this dog class will have a name equal to biscuit, a breed equal to husky, and an age equal to 8. So as you can guess, this may not be ideal, or this may not be wise, because we know that different dogs will have different name, different breed, and different age. So we want these properties right here to be dynamic. So we don't want to hard code this, because right now, if I were to go back to my shell, and I create another object called dog2 equal dog, and I were to say dog2.name, I get biscuit. And similarly, if I say dog1.name, I get biscuit, but obviously dog1 and dog2 are two different dogs, right? So we don't want to basically hard code these values because every object created from this class will have their name set to breed, their name set to biscuit I should say, and their breed set to husky, and their age set to 8. While there is something that I should point out, and it is that objects are mutable, meaning that we can change the values of various properties of the object. So in this case, let's change the value of dog2 name. And we can do that by simply saying dog2.name equal Rex. And just by doing that, if I were to call dog2.name, you can see I get Rex. So objects are mutable, meaning that we can always change the values of the various properties that the object have. Similarly, we can change the age of dog2 to be 10. So if we were to say dog2.age, we get 10. And let's change it back to, well, let's change it to 8 actually. So dog2age equal 8. And if I were to say dog2.age now, we get back 8. So as I said before, objects are mutable, so we can always change the value of these properties. But like I said before, it's not really wise to hard code these attributes because when we do it this way, we're basically saying every dog object created from this dog class will have these attributes and these values. It will have a name of biscuit, a breed of husky, and an age of 8. But we know, just as there are many dogs out there that have different name, breed, and age, we want our code to basically reflect that. And that's why we're going to talk about this special init function that allows us to basically, when creating objects, to dynamically give them the values that we want them to have rather than hard coding it here as to what we did. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to comment out these. And we're going to use the init function to basically, when we're creating our classes, we're going to specify the name, breed, and age of the object that's going to be created. So it basically allows us to dynamically create objects with different properties or different values for different properties. So you'll see that in a moment. So as with any function, the init function, which is a special function, we begin by saying def followed by 2 underscores and in it followed by 2 more underscore, and then we have the parentheses. And as with any function, we always need to pass the self argument to the function. The self argument needs to be the first argument that any function accepts once it's been defined within a class. So init is short for initialization, and what the init function says to Python is, before you create this object, what I want from you is the value for a name, value for a breed, and the value for an age. So the init function is saying to Python is, before you create this dog object, you need to supply me with a name, breed, and age. So as you can see, this allows every object to be different in the sense that they'll have the same properties, name, breed, and age, but they'll all have different values. Because for every object, dog object that we create, we're going to have to specify name, age, and breed, rather than what we did before, in which case we just hard coded it, which means that every object created will have the exact name, the exact breed, and the exact age. And we don't want that because we know that dogs have different names, different breed, and different age. So we're saying the init function says you need to give me a name, breed, and age before I can create the object. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna say self dot name is equal to name. And what this means is that we know that self basically represents the object, right? So we're saying this object name is gonna be equal to the name that was given up here. That's what this entire line is saying. This entire line is saying, self is saying this object, so we're saying this object name is going to be equal to the name that was given up here or was passed into the init function. right? And remember, the init function stands for initialization. Whenever Python creates a class, the first thing it looks for is the init function. Before it does anything else, it looks for the init function and execute the init function, right? So that's what the init function does. Before Python does anything else, it looks for the init function, and if there is an init function, it will execute it. If there is no init function, then it will just continue on normally. But the first thing Python does when it creates a class, it looks for this function. All right? So what else are we going to say? We're going to say this object, breed, so self.breed, is equal to the breed that was passed in through the init function. And then we're going to say self.age, this object's age is going to be equal to the age that was passed into the init function. All right, and that's it. We're going to go ahead and save. And remember, what init function does, it tells Python, before you go ahead and create this object, I'm going to need you to give me these values. And the values we have specified that we need before we can create the object is name, breed, and age. All right, so I'm going to close this. I'm going to run this now. Okay, so I'm going to say dog1 is equal to dog. And you can see right here, it asked me for name, breed, and age. So this is the init function running, because as I said before, when Python creates a class, the first thing it does is run the init function, if there is one. Okay, so we need to supply a name, so I'm going to say biscuit. The next thing we need is a breed, which is going to be husky. And the last thing we need is an age, which is going to be 8. We'll go ahead and hit enter. Similar, if we say dog1 dot name, we get biscuit. But we can also do this now. We can say dog2 is equal to dog, and now we need to specify a name. So this time I'm going to say Rex, and the breed is going to be a pit bull, and then the last thing, age, is going to be 10 years old. Okay, go ahead and hit enter, and now if I say dog2 dot name, we get Rex. And similarly, if I were to create another dog, dog3, we're gonna need to specify the same. Gonna need to specify a name, breed, and age. This time the name is gonna be princess. Breed is gonna be a poodle, and the age is gonna be 11. All right. And similarly, if we say dog3 dot name, we get princess. Dog3 dot breed, poodle. If we say dog2 this time, breed, I get pit bull. So as you can see, the init function basically says to Python, before we create this object, give me these values. And what this allows us to do, it allows us to create objects. Although they have the same properties, they'll have different values for each property. And this better represents a dog object, because what we did before was hard-coded it, which means that every dog object created would have had the name biscuit, or would have had the name, the breed husky, and the age 8 if we had left it like this. But this way, every dog object can be different. And this is basically saying, before we create the object, give me these values, and this allows every dog object to be unique in its own manner. But every dog object will be able to bark and bite. And similarly, if we were to say dog2.bark, we get roof roof, and if we say dog3.bark, we get roof roof as well. And if we say dog1.bark, we also get roof roof. So every dog object can bark and bite, but we can see, thanks to the init function, every dog object's name, breed, and age will be unique, because upon creating the object, Python is going to ask us to supply these values. If we don't supply these values, then Python is going to throw an error. And you can see that right here. Let me go ahead and show you an example. So if we say dog4 equal dog, They asked us for a name and we just gave it one value. So name is tramp. We go ahead and hit enter. It tells us the init function, this one right here, the init function is missing two required positional arguments, breed and age. So as you can see, we need these values to create the object, and that's what the init function basically does. This is known as the constructor. And it's saying to Python, for me to construct this object, I'm going to need these materials, and the materials are name, breed, and age. And this allows our object to be dynamic, our object to have dynamic properties, meaning that they all have the same properties but different values for these properties. And I hope that makes sense. So as you can see, this is a much better way. So with that being said, you're probably wondering, what if there is a property? Well, sometimes I should say it is okay to define some attributes up here. For example, in one instance where it may be okay to define attributes right here is if it's a attribute or a property that is the same across all objects, such as saying number underscore of legs equal 4. In this case, we know that all dogs, regardless of age, breed, and name, will have 4 legs. So in this case, it would be okay or acceptable to write the attribute or the property or specify the property right here, because we know regardless of the name, breed, and age of the dog, it's going to have 4 legs. So in these cases, I like to use up here for properties that I know that are going to be the same across all objects. So across all dog objects, they're all going to have number of legs is going to be equal to 4 unless the dog is weird. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save, and if I run this, I'm going to say dog1 again is equal to dog, and I'm going to say name is going to be husky, and breed is going to be husky as well. So name husky, breed husky, and age 10. And if I were to say something like dog1 dot number underscore of legs, I get 4. So in this case, this is acceptable when the property is going to be the same across all objects. But for properties such as name and breed and age, which is going to be different from object to object, I would suggest you put it in the init function. Similarly, there's another way you can specify attributes that are going to be the same for all objects, and you can do it instead of the init function. So I'm going to say here, comment out that instead of here, I'm going to say right here, I'm going to say self dot number underscore of legs equal 4. And what this is saying is that this dog object number of legs is going to be equal to 4. This is also one way you can specify attributes across all objects, right? So if we go ahead and run, and we save, and we do the same thing we did before. Okay, let me go ahead and copy this and paste it down here, and go ahead and do this. Nope. Dot number underscore of legs. We hit enter, we still get 4. So as you can see, we can define it right here, or we can define it up here. Well, you see most persons define it within the init function, because that's typically the best place to do it. But you can also do it up here too as well. So it's all a matter of preference. No one method is better than the other, but they both produce the same results. But just remember that when you're defining it, if you put it inside the init function, just remember the self property. And the self property is just saying this object, right? Alright, as I said before, the self object just represent the object, and we're saying this object number of legs equal 4. So alright, that's it for this video, and let's do a quick recap so that we know what we accomplished. Alright, so recap. We talk about adding attributes to our classes, so any object created from the class will have various properties, right? We looked at that. We looked at making our objects perform various actions through the use of class methods, or basically function definitions within the class, right? So function definitions within the class are known as class methods. And one important thing to note is that all methods or function defined within a class, the first argument that needs to be passed into the function is the self argument. And then if there are any more additional arguments that are needed, you pass them in after. But the first argument needs to be the self argument. And we know that self just represents the object, right? We also looked at the special init function, which is short for initialization. It is used as a means of dynamically creating our object with different values for the various properties they have. So basically what the init function does to Python is says to Python, before I can create this object, I need these properties or these values. In our case, it was name, breed, and age. Alright, so thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. And please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And hit the notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I post new content. And once again, thank you for watching and take care.